to be rescued. We did a very yeoman's job of preparing for this hurricane and to make our public aware of the danger of this hurricane. 20 to 40 inches of rain, 10.5-foot surge, category 4 to 5. So we were getting that message out any way we could. It's not unusual that in North Carolina we've been blessed for 20 or 30 years we've had hurricanes, but not of this significance. So
Sir, I understand there's a curfew now in place. Can you tell us about that curfew?
We decided at 7 o'clock this morning to do a 24-hour curfew to get our streets cleared, our power lines restored. Some of them could possibly be energized, somebody could get hurt, and to get limbs and trees off of the road. The problem we have is with 20 to 30 inches of rain right now, coupled with a 10.5-foot surge, we have ground conditions that we have trees with just a little bit of wind, they're blowing over. So we want our citizens safe, and part of that is to provide our first responders time to get out and assess the area. And we've had 3 fires during this period of time. One of them we couldn't actually get to because of the flood conditions.
Sir, you were talking a little bit about volunteer rescue teams coming in. Any advice that you have for these folks? I know there's a curfew in place, but what do you tell to neighbors who want to just help other neighbors? Tell them this time, seriously, like right now, still evacuate. We don't know what this storm's going to do. It could do what some of the other ones have done. It could sit here and fuel itself with the water offshore, and it could turn right around and cut. And I mean, most of these hurricanes go north. So you know, this is a serious hurricane, and it continues to be one. And you know, if you can evacuate, go ahead and get in the car and go west of Raleigh, and stay out of town for a couple of days till we can get this thing under control. We have 5 shelters in Craven County. 3 of them are right in the New Bern area. We will get you transportation. All you have to do is call 911, and we will get you some transportation. And as I speak, the first responders in New Bern, in conjunction with the volunteers coming in, are doing we're doing water recovery right now for individuals that are stuck in pocket areas of town you can't get out by traditional roads. And so, Mayor, what right now at this moment is your greatest concern?
Well, my greatest concern is don't let your guard down. We have actually had some 911 folks when we got there that called to get rescued that have seeing the water go down, and maybe for a short period of time there's not a band of rain. They said, I think things are going to be okay. I don't want to go to the shelter now. Go to that shelter. This is not a predictable hurricane. We've already seen what it's done with the 10.5-foot storm surge. Don't try to be a riverboat gambler on the thing. Go get in a shelter or evacuate.
Sir, we understand 30,000 people without power. Any idea, especially as you have said, this is an unpredictable storm. Any idea when those folks can get their power?
Well, the first thing until these subside, we cannot put our linemen in harm's way. But I mean, you can't put a electric lineman in a bucket with a 70-mile-an-hour wind. That's not going to happen. So as soon as the winds slow down a little bit, we're going to get these. We've got crews through Electric Cities. We've got crews from Missouri, and we've got folks coming into the state to help us get our power restored. But we're waiting on the winds to die down a bit.
Waiting on the winds. Mayor, I want to thank you very much, Mayor, for helping us.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now is meteorologist and CBSN contributor Jeff Baradelli. Jeff, we were talking about just this 2 p.m. advisory came out. Is this still a hurricane?
It is barely. Winds are 75 miles an hour, so it is weakening. That's some good news. But the tropical storm force winds will likely continue probably for at least another 24 hours. But don't let your guard down is the bottom line. I think what's going to happen here is we're going to see another 2 feet of rain in some areas. That's the big thing that we're worried about right now, is the amount of rain that's going to tally up because the storm is still only moving at 5 miles an hour.
What does that mean, Jeff, when it's moving that slowly at 5 miles an hour?
Well, you know, places that are getting buffeted by tropical storm force winds with gusts to hurricane force will continue to see that for a prolonged period of time. More damage, more trees down, more power outages, and more flooding. And I've been talking about it all morning, and anybody who's been watching is saying, I've heard this before, but I just want to emphasize that freshwater rainfall flooding is going to be what this storm is remembered as. It's going to produce flooding like people in North Carolina, in some cases, have never experienced before.
Are these areas that are even equipped with this amount of flooding? We know they've been hit by hurricanes before.
Yeah.
But can they absorb this much water?
Well, the ground is already saturated. So far, Wilmington is seeing basically a record rainfall year already, and that's before Florence hit. So now we're looking at probably another 20 inches of rain, maybe on top of what we have right now. In total, someplace will probably pick up over 40 inches. Just check the latest rainfall estimates on the radar. There are a couple of places just to the south of Wilmington that have already seen 20 inches of rain, and we have another 2 to 3 days of on and off heavy rain to go.
So we're looking at the water here in this image in Wilmington, North Carolina. You were talking a little bit about river levels. What do we know about river levels so far?
The river levels are starting to go up. I noticed stream flow is about double, if more, than what it would typically be. We're already starting to see some major flooding in the river right near Wilmington, North Carolina. Record level are forecast, meaning the highest levels that they've ever recorded, at least since records have been kept, are likely within the next few days in parts of North Carolina. Remember, it's not just coastal North Carolina, it's northern parts of South Carolina. It's eventually going to be in western parts of North Carolina and South Carolina as the storm slowly moves that way. And remember, when the storm hits the mountains, it'll squeeze out all the rain all at once. It's flash flooding in the mountains of North Carolina. Then it moves up the Appalachians into Pennsylvania. And we are likely here in New York City to see showers, thunderstorms, and a really stormy day here on Tuesday. We're not exactly sure where it's going to end up in New York, either upstate or downstate, but it looks like it's going to be a mess for the next several days until this moves out. Again, we have a blocking pattern right now. The only reason that Florence was able to go from the central Atlantic Ocean, we have never seen this in record keeping, a storm that goes from the central Atlantic and makes landfall on the East Coast. This is a first. It's because of this big blocking high and tremendously warm water temperatures off New England, off New York City right now, fueling not only the blocking high, but also the energy for Florence to sustain itself. So we have kind of a strange pattern going on right now, and we do think that climate change is contributing to some of the aspects of Hurricane Florence, and we know that it's going to be impacting hurricanes in the future.
This might be a dumb question, but you talk about the warm weather. Is it climate change that's impacting this warm weather? Because it's Ari, one of our producers, was explaining to me that it's the warm weather that fuels the hurricane.
It is. It's the warm water. I mean, hurricanes live solely off of warm water. And so the warmer the water, the stronger these hurricanes can get. We know in experiments and reports that researchers have done that it's likely the number of Category 4 and Category 5 storms are going up because of climate change, and that's likely to continue. But here's an interesting one. The number of hurricanes in total are likely to go down in the future. That's somewhat unexpected. But we do think that hurricanes are going to produce a lot more rain in the future, and there already are. Florence is likely to see a decent percentage higher amount of rain just because of climate change, because of the warm water you talked about that is fueling this storm, and the warm air too.
So Jeff, if we're expecting more water, is there anything that cities can do to be, look forward and be pro-thinking on this?
So we have to adapt. We have to mitigate and we have to adapt. Now, this is not from freshwater flooding, but the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. In Miami and Miami Beach, they are literally starting to build the streets about 2 feet or more higher than they are right now, and they're installing pumps on Miami Beach. So if you've been to Miami Beach, they're spending $500 million to install pumps and raise these streets by around 2 feet or so. This is the future for coastal cities. We're seeing problems in Norfolk, Virginia. We're seeing problems in North Carolina where the erosion is eating away the beaches. Sea level is rising, and people are still building homes on the coast. There is a risk there, and a big risk to coastal areas.
So fascinating. Jeff Berardelli, thank you very much for joining us, Jeff. Well, Diana Holland is the commander of the South Atlantic Division of the Army Corps of Engineers. She joins me now by phone from Atlanta. What would you say right now is your priority, Diana?
Well, hey, Rena, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program. We have several priorities, of course. Number one being the safety and well-being of our people. Number two is positioning for the response. We have 4 Corps of Engineers geographic districts that are forward positioned in each of the states that will be severely affected, and so making sure that we're going to be able to respond. And then the next priority is to respond, and we have a number of missions that we expect to be assigned to do, whether it's in support of FEMA or it's our normal Corps of Engineers responsibilities that we would do as needed. And then finally, we really want to communicate what we're doing. We think it's very important to explain how we're supporting the federal government, how we're supporting the states, and how we're supporting our communities so that they get the best information in a timely manner.
How do you prepare for a storm like this?
Well, one of the ways we do it is we learn lessons from previous storms. As you know, this organization led the Corps of Engineers effort in last year in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we have a lot of experience, and that experience informs us on how best be prepared. We reinforce many of our relationships with the federal government, other agencies, as well as the states and communities. We reinforce partnerships, and we practice, and we train together, and we build scenarios, and we exercise them. So I think between all of our experience last year and then being very aggressive this year to be positioned in the right place and able to respond at the right time is how we've been able to prepare for this.
Diana, when you compare this hurricane to previous ones, how is this one different?
Well, it's a little early. I would say it's a little early to characterize it.
In terms of preparation and just outlook on what you're expecting and anticipating.
Yeah, I think that we are always, we're never complacent when it comes to a severe storm. But we are probably more attentive and more sensitive and looking for those additional opportunities because of what we've been through in the last 14 months.
I just had my colleague Jeff Berardelli on talking about climate change and the impact. Is that forcing you to do anything different or your approach to securing these areas?
We know the Corps of Engineers, because it has responsibilities for the nation's waterways, navigable waterways, the harbors. We do a lot along the coastline for protection of
Holly Mae,
people
thank you very much for being with us.
We are paying a lot of attention to the rising sea levels, to the levels of our reservoirs and rivers, and so we are studying along the coast in particular how it is changing and where our vulnerabilities are so that as we go forward, the federal government can invest in some of the protective measures.
And as you've seen sort of the rising sea levels and climate change taking its toll, are there any areas that you're choosing to invest in that could make a difference?
All right, y'all, thank you for joining us again. We've been here a number of times, and of course the hurricane's been with us for some time now, but we're glad to have you here. We'll keep you up to date completely. I'd like to call on Chaplain John Denny.
North Carolina all the way around Florida and out to Mississippi.
I'm Chaplain John Denny, South Carolina National Guard.
Vulnerable locations.
And in 1 Kings 19, the prophet Elijah is on a mountain, and he's looking for God. And while on top of that mountain, he experiences an earthquake, a mighty wind, and a fire. And as he starts to get discouraged, because God's not in that, God reveals himself in a very small voice. And it's in that time Elijah realizes that God's not always in the big things in life. A lot of times he's in the small things we take for granted. And if you would, please pray. Almighty God, we want to pause and give you thanks as we're able to see you and experience you in the little things in life. While we may not be able to see you in the wind and the rain of this storm, your presence will be made clear in the small whispers. Whispers like people helping people, friends and strangers alike, Clemson and Carolina fans banding together, other states giving of resources, all out of love for each other. In the worst of situations, you show us your best, and for that, we give you thanks. Continue to watch over and protect us, and we'll be sure to give you all the honor, praise, and glory. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Chaplain Denny. Excuse me, John Quirello, National Weather Service.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. So as you know, Hurricane Florence made landfall this morning around 7:15 a.m. near Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. The Wilmington Airport measured a gust to 105 miles an hour, which is the second highest ever recorded there. So far, looking around South Carolina, the highest winds that we've observed here, wind gusts that we've observed here, is 63 miles an hour just north of Conway, 61 miles an hour at Myrtle Beach International Airport, and 60 miles an hour at Grand Strand Airport. Florence is still a Category 1 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 75 miles an hour and located 35 miles east-northeast of Myrtle Beach. Florence is a very large storm. If you were to look on radar at the rain shield, you will see that it's approximately the size of the state of South Carolina. One big problem is that Florence is only moving at 5 miles an hour, which is only a little faster than the average walking speed of a person. This means we're in for long-duration impacts, especially across the northeast part of the state. There are many hazards associated with Florence, so I'll break down some of the biggest impacts we're concerned with. One is the wind. Hurricane-force winds are possible into this evening across the Grand Strand as the center of Florence slowly shifts westward into the northeast part of the state. Tropical storm-force winds will spread into parts of the Low Country and Midlands tonight into Saturday, with wind gusts to about 50 miles an hour as it weakens into a tropical storm and eventually crosses into the Midlands on Saturday. Winds should then diminish on Sunday as the remnants of Florence lift northwest out of the state. These winds will likely result in downed trees and power outages across many parts of our state. Rainfall and the likelihood of deadly flash flooding is perhaps the biggest concern. Catastrophic rainfall amounts of 15 to 25 inches is expected across parts of the Grand Strand NPD. Rainfall amounts drop off as you head south and west across the state, but in the I-26 corridor extending from Charleston, Columbia, and into the Greenville-Spartanburg area, rainfall amounts could be as high as 3 to 7 inches, which could be enough to produce flash flooding in low-lying and urbanized areas, as well as in the mountains of South Carolina. The heavy rain potential will persist through the weekend. As has previously been mentioned, this will be a multi-phase event, as once the water falls, it will flow into area rivers and is expected to produce major to record-breaking floods across portions of the PD and Catawba River basins beginning late this weekend and persisting through next week. But given the threat of flash flooding and eventual river flooding, it's important to be prepared to seek higher ground if you live in a low-lying or flood-prone location. Never drive across water-covered roadways, which is the main cause of
emergency management officials say firefighters scrambled Thursday to put out the flames that damaged or destroyed
as we've seen, this Hurricane Florence
Lionel
is different from those we've had before.
Chimney crashed on
this
top of his SUV.
Is going to be with us for about 2
In another
days.
neighborhood,
if you remember when Hurricane Hugo came along in 1989,
actually it started in the basement. The basement, from what I understand, my wife says,
just north of Charleston.
The boilers
about midnight,
blow up.
It was in Columbia.
Officials are blaming the fires on gas lines that became overpressurized. Communities like this one are still without power as officials, including the NTSB, investigate the cause of
it was like a rocket.
Things that we will be looking at
compared
will
to
be
Florence.
the design of the pipeline
Florence
system.
is here to stay for a while. And as John
Any maintenance or upgrades that may have been done or in the process of being done.
The gas company shut off gas to the area and plans to inspect 8,600 affected customers as a safety precaution.
Not only on us, but
Kenneth
it's
Craig,
also
CBS News, North Andover, Massachusetts.
And
President Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort has flipped. He's pleading guilty and he will cooperate with special counsel Robert Mueller. Well, this comes after prosecutors filed new charges against Manafort in court, including conspiracy against the United States and conspiracy to obstruct justice. CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reed joins us now. You know, Paula, I'm kind of struck by the fact that you asked Manafort's lawyer if there was any chance of him flipping back in July. What did that fight for you?
And then we're going to have to deal with
any chance that he may decide to flip and cooperate?
No chance.
No chance?
That brings a whole new set of consequences.
So, Paula, what's changed? What's
in addition to the high rain and
well, this is really one of the biggest surprises in the investigation so far, Rena, because as you saw there, they've been consistent since the time that he was indicted around this time last year, that he would fight these charges, that he believed that he could, if not be convicted, at least get a pardon from any eviction that came his way. We saw last month in federal court in Virginia, he was convicted on charges of tax fraud and bank fraud. Then, after assessing this next trial that he was going to face here in Washington, D.C., on charges more closely related to his foreign lobbying work on behalf of pro-Russia Ukrainian politicians, he decided that he was willing to enter a deal, but the special counsel would not cut him any slack, not grant him a break, unless he agreed to cooperate. Now, I had been consistently told that he was trying to strike a deal that did not require cooperation, because they are worried that if he cooperates, that may jeopardize his chances of a pardon. At this point, Rena, we don't know what he has agreed to provide to the special counsel. He has to testify in upcoming cases. He has to provide documents, we know, and agree to full cooperation in order for this deal to go through. But this is one of the most significant witnesses that the special counsel has secured so far.
I know this news just came down, Paula. Do we have any sense of what kind of documents they'd like him to turn over?
So this is going to
well, of course, he was there for a lot of the real key events in this investigation timeline. Most notable
that we are equal to. We're liable to have
we want to take you now to West Columbia, South Carolina, where Governor Henry McMaster is giving an update on the state's emergency response to Hurricane Florence.
Do not drive around the barricades. These are the same warnings and urgings we've been doing throughout. Be careful, be smart. If you have any questions, call the authorities. Go to scend.org and you can get instructions there. Call the numbers that have been given. Call the local. Call the sheriff's office. Call 911. A lot of those numbers will still be operating that have been given before. But don't take things into your own hands and take a chance. The last thing we want to do is lose lives in South Carolina because of impatience and because of not being smart. We've been in constant communication, as you can notice over the days with these conferences and talking to people around the state, and we're not forgetting any part of the state. I want to point out particularly over in Marion County, your member Nichols really got hit last time. Well, they're liable to get hit again. And I've been speaking just last night to the mayor, the chairman of county council, the county administrator, current and former House members, and senators, and I've assured them, and they already knew because they've been in
Hurricane Florence made landfall this morning
well,
around
that we're pulling for them, we're praying for them, we're
North Carolina.
And we want to keep
Airport
the damage
measured a
to
gust
the
to
minimum
105 miles an hour, which is the second highest ever recorded
to an
there.
absolute minimum, and the
So
whole
far,
team South
looking around
Carolina is
South
backing
Carolina,
them.
the highest
Not
winds
only
that
them,
we've
but
observed
every
here,
other
wind gusts that
part
we've
of
observed
South
here,
Carolina.
63 miles an
It's
hour,
populated
just
and
north of
densely
Conway,
populated as
61
well as
miles an
sparsely.
hour at
And
Myrtle
we've
Beach
been on the phone,
International
those of
Airport,
us here,
and 60 miles an
talking
hour
face
at
to
Grand
face as
Strand
well
Airport.
with the coastal mayors, the coastal council members, the sheriffs, emergency
Florence is still a
officials, and
Category
all
1
on the coast
hurricane
in
with
particular,
maximum
as well as
winds of
friends and
75
neighbors
miles
who
an
call
hour
with
and
information
located 35
and
miles
insight,
east
and
northeast of Myrtle Beach.
It's
Florence is a very large storm. If you look on radar at the rain shield, you will see that it's approximately the size of the state of South Carolina. One big problem is that Florence is only moving at 5 miles an hour, which is only a little faster than the average walking speed of a person,
National Guard.
especially across the northeast part of the state.
All of Team South Carolina continues to be positioned to provide rescue and security measures for the citizens of South Carolina. We're also working to preserve infrastructure as time permits. We will be prepared to support re-entry. We'll be prepared to respond to needs of isolated areas as the storm progresses. The governor has asked us to have our chaplain visit the shelters, and so we have chaplains, volunteer chaplains, local pastors visiting shelters to make sure that shelter needs to be taken care of.
Is perhaps the biggest concern.
Thank you, Jim.
Catastrophic rainfall amounts of 15 to 25 inches.
Well, as you can see, the storm is still impacting the state, and we still have a ways to go, as reported by John Q. earlier. We are seeing trees down in the Dillon, Marion, and Horry areas, and our team are working those trees as weather permits. Of course, with the storm approaching and tropical storm force winds in the area, we're trying to make sure that our employees and our team members are safe. So as soon as the tropical storm force winds subside and we're able to get in there, we will start working our way back in.
As is previously
we'll have two
this will be a
main
multi-phase
focus
event,
areas.
Once the water
our
falls,
first focus area, once the storm subsides, is to basically partner with the utility companies, National Guard, first responders, county government, and others to cut our way back into the areas. And we'll do it based on a priority basis. We have pre-identified our priority routes and regaining access back into the area for the first responders, and that'll be our interstates, major highways, and critical infrastructure type facilities, so hospitals, shelters, things along those lines, fire departments.
As we've seen,
once we get through what we call the first push, or gaining entry back into the area, once the storm subsides, our next focus will turn towards planning and pre-positioning ourselves for the flooding that we expect to come to the area. We're focusing very closely on the Lumber River, the Little PD, and the Waccamaw, and we're studying all of our bridge crossings and causeways throughout that region. Our main goal is to try to maintain east-west and north-south mobility throughout this area as well as the rest of the state. This is a statewide event, as the governor and others have mentioned, and we are trying to prepare and get assets in place so that we can quickly react to the storm as it progresses. One of the things that we're doing with the team that's here and others is that we are looking at real-time data with regards to the rainfall and making adjustments to our plan as needed based on actual data. Thank you, Governor.
Chief Keel, SLED. So the PD is going to see a lot of flooding.
Good afternoon, Mark Keel, SLED Chief. We, as all of our state law enforcement partners, are now transitioning into our security missions for our local agencies. SLED, DNR, Triple P, DPS, SCDC, PRT, and SCCJ, along with the National Guard, are fulfilling these requests. These requests range from patrol to controlling traffic control points, enforcing curfews, and security in our shelters. We'll continue to support our local law enforcement partners until we get into the recovery area for the duration of this event. Again, everyone should be aware that law enforcement will be out in force. As the governor has said, we will not allow our citizens to be taken advantage of by those who refuse to obey our laws. Again, as I've said, lawlessness will not be tolerated.
It also means that there will be times when we have to really be on the lookout for the looters and those.
Thank you, Governor. Leroy Smith, Department of Public Safety. All lane reversal routes have closed and returned to normal direction for US 501 as well as the I-26 corridor. We are prepared to assist the Department of Transportation with road closures and diversion routes due to the possible flooding. We're also prepared to assist SLED with law enforcement and security missions. Our response post-landfall could include, but not limited to, as I just mentioned, road closures, diversion routes, investigating collisions, directing traffic in the intersection where the traffic control devices are gone or inoperable, perimeter security, access points for some utility vehicles. And I know the governor mentioned it earlier, we mentioned it yesterday, but I just want to emphasize the importance of the roadway conditions. They will be dangerous in the impacted area. Therefore, we're asking motorists in those impacted areas to please stay off the roads unless absolutely necessary. Again, don't drive around barricades and don't drive in or through standing water. Beneath the standing water could be down power lines, debris, tree branches, or the roadway could be washed out. Thank you, Governor.
We've been in constant communication, as you have noticed over the
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to give an update on the sheltering situation. As of 2 p.m. today, we had 70 total shelters open across the state. 57 of them are general population shelters, and 13 are special medical needs shelters. We have 2 general population shelters that are full. These are Flowertown Elementary in Dorchester, Goose Creek High School in Berkeley. We have 4 special medical needs shelters that are full. Currently, there are 152 clients in the special medical needs shelters. In our general population shelters, we have a total of 6,433 individuals in the shelters. We have a capacity for 44,648. We are at 14% of that capacity, so that leaves us with 38,224 spaces in our shelter available at this time. I'd like to just make a few comments about food in the shelters. Each county has an established feeding plan that is individual to their county that they have to sustain their operation for 72 hours at any given time. It has been verified that Horry County has a 5-day feeding supply in their shelters at this time. Again, the sources of that food vary from county to county. It could be food bank, school cafeterias, Salvation Army kitchens, or food banks. Currently, we are receiving no issues with food in shelters, but if we receive them, we will address them as they come in. I'd like to make a comment about cots in shelters. Currently, the National Guard is distributing 5,000 cots into shelters across the state, starting at the coast and moving inland. Additional cots have been identified and a distribution plan is being worked on at this time. And as a result of these facts, you see we have over 6,000 people in shelters. Right now we don't have a 1-to-1 ratio for individuals to cots. So as I go back over what to bring with you to the shelters, please be reminded to bring bedding materials, as when you arrive, you may not have your individual cot upon your arrival.
Well, as you can see,
please remember to bring your blankets, pillows, and comfort items, to include bedding. Medicines if you have chronic conditions such as high blood pressure and diabetes, important identification document, special food items if you have small children or if you are on a restricted diet. And once again, go to your SCEMD.org for a live list of the shelters. Look at the ones with the green paws for pet-friendly shelters. We still have Blenheim Elementary and Middle School in Marlboro, Cane Bay High School in Berkeley, DeVos Middle in Dorchester, and Lake Marion High School in Orangeburg that are pet-friendly. Thank you,
county government, and others to cut our way back into the areas. We're moving based on a priority basis. We have pre-identified
Thank you, Governor.
our priority
First, I'd like to note that as part of Team South Carolina, DHEC has deployed over 700 of our employees across the state in preparation for this storm. We've conducted 262 pre-storm assessments of dams across the state. In addition to that, as the storm continues, we have 27 of those dams that, with the help of the Guard, will continue to provide surveillance on those dams. 114 healthcare facilities in the evacuation zones were evacuated. This includes nursing homes and assisted living facilities. 7 hospitals were evacuated and closed in preparation of the storm. We are already working with those hospitals that as the storm passes, as weather conditions permit, as road conditions permit, and as the condition of the hospitals permit, to try to get emergency services back in place as soon as possible.
We are trying to prepare and get assets in place so that we can quickly react.
Department of Natural Resources.
So thank you, Governor. Once again today, we know this is going to be a large rain event, and we're watching this rain and doing models almost hourly so we can predict where the greatest needs may be. We have some real-time information now from North Carolina because we've seen that rain, and our hydrologists are working with hydrologists from DOT to look at that, to map it, to look at roadways and bridges, to see what areas should be on top of those priority lists. Still, the PD Basin is our area of greatest concern because the large amount of rainfall that's fallen in North Carolina, which also flows into South Carolina on top of the rainfall here in South Carolina. So it is our greatest concern. We are looking at the Santee River Basin now as well, especially that lower part of the Santee River Basin. Fortunately, that area is the least populated of our river basins, but still it looks as if we may have some flood conditions there. We'll continue to walk our way across the state as rain falls and look at all of these river basins and model to attempt to be ahead of the flood conditions as much as possible. I would also remind you again today that you boaters, remember that boating conditions, just like highway conditions, can be very hazardous. So please stay off the water unless you absolutely have to. And some of these flooded areas where we have subdivisions or hazardous conditions, our officers on the water may restrict you from going in because of the hazardous conditions. So know that ahead of time. We also will be on the water in some vulnerable areas where we have homes that may be vacated, and as Chief Keel said, we take looting very seriously. And if we find you there and you're trying to take advantage of someone that has vacated their home, then we will take appropriate action. Again, we would ask our boaters to be careful on the water. Once again, please don't sightsee. Please don't go out just to look at the flood, because your boating activity could cause a lot of damage to someone's home. We stand ready to respond as soon as the rain stops, and we'll be doing search and rescue missions and security on folks' homes in these flooded areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. First, I'd like to provide an update on the outages. These are customers without electric service. For Horry County, it's 48,632. Dillon, 4,464. Marion, 4,408. Florence, 3,946. Total statewide electric outages at this time is 66,924, and this data was pulled at 2 o'clock today. I wanted to follow up on comments by Secretary Hall. ORS has been working with DOT and with their support, coordinating with the electric cooperatives and other utilities, so that as Secretary Hall explained, as they cut in, that the utilities can go in with them and come in as quickly as they can to work towards restoration of service. But again, it can't be said often enough, please be patient. This storm is slow moving, and that will hamper or delay restoration efforts. And they can't send the crews out until it's safe to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kim Stimson, Emergency Management Division.
In our general population.
Thank you, sir. Here at the State Emergency Response Team here at the SEOC, our priorities are sheltering and initial response, including flood operations, and then it'll be followed up by initial damage assessment and reentry. In terms of what's going on down at the county level, we've got right now, there's 26 counties that their emergency operations centers are operational, and their primary focus continues to be sheltering and initial response. And we're moving some of our EMD liaisons to the PD area because that's where the major effort is expected to be. And we're looking, our planning teams collectively are looking at distinct possibility, especially in the PD, where some of those counties internally may become isolated due to the floodwater. We're coordinating with those counties to pre-stage food, water, and fuel in advance of the floodwaters, and then we're also developing plans to continue resupply after the floodwaters have arrived. In world of logistics, we've got 687 requests that have come in here. The 555 are complete or in progress. We've got 13 out-of-state teams on site here in South Carolina from 5 different states and about 300 personnel. We've delivered 43 generators to date in various locations, but primarily along the coast and the PD area. Just a reminder that in terms of the wind danger that we still have here is staying indoors during the storm and away from the windows and glass doors, closing the interior doors and securing and bracing external doors, keeping the blinds and windows, rather blinds and curtains closed, and certainly if the need arises, take refuge in a small interior room, closet, or hallway within the house. And be prepared, as I already said, without electricity for extended period of time. So if you can have a battery-operated radio to stay connected, that's a great idea. And there's always the possibility of tornadoes as well, as John talked about earlier. Public information. Again, the public information phone system for any questions that you might have, 1-866-246-0133. but that's not 911. Call 911 if you have an emergency, but call the other number if you have any questions about what might you do or what you'd like to do. Already mentioned sced.org. It's got plenty of links in there. It'll take you to just about anything that you need to find. And then the same with the South Carolina Emergency Manager app.
Go to your Thank you. And now we will try to answer your questions. Yes, ma'am.
The Wall Canal, the Lombard, and the PD rivers have been mentioned for possibly historic flooding. Which roadways are y'all concerned about being washed out? And you mentioned isolated counties. What are your preparations to help with that?
Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Governor. So as Director Taylor mentioned, we are getting real-time data now on the actual rainfalls and updating our models to try to predict and forecast which roadways may be overtopped and which areas we need to focus on. I don't have a definite answer for you on that right this moment, but we are working that hard and making sure that we'll be pre-positioned and make sure that we close any roadways that we would be concerned about based on the actual data, real rainfall, actual amounts, as well as making sure that we're establishing our priority routes for reentry post-flood, once flood happens. So I don't have a definite answer for you yet on exactly which routes. Obviously, each one of those crossings over those rivers, we are analyzing those very carefully. The elevation of those bridges, the elevation of the roadway and the causeways leading up to those bridges, comparing that to the rainfall amounts in our floodway modeling, and then once we make some determinations from that, we will take action appropriately.
Let me just ask specifically, what about 501 and 95?
It's too early to make any determination on those just yet. We are still running the flood models based on real-time rainfall data.
Can we talk about specific numbers and measures in place, whether it be swift water rescue teams or personnel to try to stop this water? Is there someone that can do that?
Map it, to look at roadways and bridges, to see what areas are.
Ms. Falk. Yes, sir.
Yes, for search and rescue assets, we have about 750 search and rescuers personnel. They were based here in Columbia, but they're already moving out. We have some in Lake City, Somerville, Clarendon, Sumter. They're placed out ready to respond as soon as the winds die down. So we've got FEMA teams from our out-of-state resources that Director Stinson mentioned, and then of course our in-state resources.
When a tree fell on their house.
The storm hitting the area, but have there been any conversations about when schools might reopen in South Carolina?
The father was then transported and has injuries. We're going to continue to monitor Hurricane Florence.
Also adding to the emergency, we have 6 National Guard helicopters that are equipped to do hoist operations, along with there are 10 Coast Guard helicopters that are allocated to both of the Carolinas. And then, of course, we have the helicopter carrier off our coast that we have access to, and another Air Force parajumpers. So we're good on the aerial piece, and we have 81 high water vehicles allocated out to the counties to access people that may be stranded.
As the schools will make those announcements.
Also, when you're looking at personnel that are available on site now, we currently have well over 200 law enforcement officers that are pre-staged. They're in the areas now, they're pre-positioned, they were there for law enforcement missions ahead of time. Now they're there, DNR, SLED, Triple P, and others. We're on site now, waiting for a time when flood comes, already pre-positioned in those locations.
General? And it's what do you have people allocated? We probably have 6,000 or 7,000 people if you count everyone that can be converted to a rescue asset, whether it be a county person, a city person, a state person, somebody that specializes in search and rescue. So it's a tremendous effort and a lot of available resources out there, scattered out through the fire departments and the counties, so they're accessible when someone calls, calling 911.
Thank you. Question?
Governor, you've been talking a lot about having discussions federally with President Trump. What are those? Have you had a recent conversation with the president? What does that entail? How would you respond to his response?
I think we've had conversations with almost everybody in Washington. all the agency heads, including the Mr. Long, the head of FEMA, as early as this morning. And excuse me, those resources are available. We've been in constant communication, and we've also in communication with the county officials, all the local officials, and everybody involved in this effort to determine what we need and when we need it, which of course will be very soon, and we're making those efforts.
Governor, can we get back to my earlier question? Sorry, I understand the storm is still incoming, but have there been any conversations about when schools may?
Been a lot of conversations about schools, and we'll be making those announcements at a later date.
You mentioned you talked to folks in Nichols. What other towns have you reached out to that might flood?
Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle Beach, Charleston, North Charleston, Pawleys Island, Beaufort, and every place in between. We've had conversations with just about everybody on the coast at one time or another. Those include the local officials as well as elected officials, senators, House members, county council.
What about more inland, like Sherrall or King Street?
We have been having those conversations, but we've been concentrating on those on the coast and in the PD.
Secretary Hall, is there a threshold of wind for which the bridges would be closed?
Pardon me, sir. Yes, the DOT, along with our local law enforcement partners, we do have certain protocols for what we call high-level bridges. Those are the tall bridges. And we also have protocols for the swing bridges or the movable bridges. And generally, 25 miles per hour or more for the movable bridges. That's when we lock those down to where only vehicular traffic can cross, so we don't open them to marine traffic. And then on the high-level bridges, at 30 miles per hour, sustained winds, high-profile vehicles are discouraged from using those high-level bridges. And then at 45 miles per hour, they are strongly discouraged by local law enforcement partners from utilizing those bridges for safety reasons, of course. Thank you.
In the Midlands areas, what specific assets are in place to mitigate flooding should it happen there?
And then at 45 miles per hour, they are strongly discouraged.
The local officials here in Richland and Lexington, they've been very familiar with the previous events, and they're looking at what they need to do in terms of localized evacuations. They've got access to their own assets that they have, which are considerable in the Midlands area, and if they need assistance, then they'll ask us for it, and we can provide assistance from other areas as well.
We have about the same number of vehicles and personnel that have been activated, not activated in reserve at this point, and those people could be activated for the Midlands if necessary too.
Governor, I saw some counties in North Carolina are starting to set curfews for people. Are you planning on doing that at any time for any areas?
Some of our local jurisdictions have done that. Chief?
There's a number of local jurisdictions that have curfews in place now. Horry County, Georgetown, the town of Andrews, Colleton County, Edisto Island Beach, Marion County, and Dillon County have got curfews that are in place or either begin this evening at 7 o'clock.
Repetitive rainfall over the same areas, and that's where we're seeing.
We've been very fortunate. We've had very little of that in the past, and it's been because
incredible rainfall totals,
law enforcement again has been out in force, not just on our roadways and our neighborhoods where we can drive, but as Director Taylor said, also in our waterways, those folks that live on our rivers, they've had both marine patrol and air patrols in those areas to strongly discourage people from moving.
It's also the tornado threat within these bands, so that's particularly dangerous.
Governor, you talked about drones yesterday. Now that Florence has made landfall, are you guys still using that technology, and what information does that provide?
What
the drones and technology you talked about yesterday.
Oh, there's a lot of modern technology,
it really hasn't changed
in
a whole lot. We do expect that slowdown to continue. Here we are now at 2 p.m. With time, you don't move very fast. We move inland, still a hurricane, and then by Saturday morning, a storm. But at the same time, we're not very far inland. We're in central South Carolina. We're still on Sunday morning in South Carolina. Very slow progress with this system. That's all the geography we're going to cover through Sunday. And we have another system in the Great Lakes, a trough that's finally going to carry Florence out of here.
Full all the reversals and all the other evacuation routes, we've estimated at 441,000
just devastating storm surge.
People,
and we've been really watching the values in these areas, 6 to 9 feet, and even inland. We've been really trying to talk about the Newburn area inland, 7 to 11 feet, and that occurs because we really have the water gets trapped. This is something we've been talking about even further north. Look how far, we're miles and miles inland, where we can still see some of this storm surge. So we're coming off a high tide. We had high tide over the last few hours. It's starting to come down. So even though the high tide's coming down, you're still going to take a lot of time to drain this water. It takes a while. If you even have the rainfall that still has to drain, it's going to be a while before we get rid of all that water. Let's take a look at the rain. This is something that we've been talking about for a while.
Another meeting here shortly to finalize that.
And Governor,
a large area of rain, 20 to 30 inches right around that center, even up to 40 inches by the time it's all said and done.
Not about that. Any more questions?
There's that notice from the Florence County Emergency Management Division that says that they are actually asking for evacuation along Black Creek in that county. Do you expect there to be more evacuations of small little streams and rivers in South Carolina, and how do people find out about that?
Yes, on Black Creek, yes, in Florence County, it's a smaller creek that floods often. So we have a lot of knowledge of that creek, and we have personnel now working with Florence County to make sure that when the evacuation takes place, if any needs that are there, we will provide them, whether it's going in by boat, remove folks, or just making sure they get out ahead of time. Right now, it's not in flood condition, so the evacuation is very timely. Again, we have a history across the state, especially these small rivers that can flood or flash flood. So our officers and our local law enforcement officers in the areas are monitoring those, and we're in the process now. Some of those where we realize we have these potential problems, we're starting to model them. We just modeled what we knew was the first priority first, and now we're starting to backfill and look at some of the smaller rivers.
Governor, yesterday Mayor Benjamin said that this won't be a repeat of the 2015 floods. Would you agree with that, or do you think that this is going to be as big?
Well, I think we're much, as he has mentioned, we're much more prepared this time because we've been through it one time before, and certainly it won't be a repeat in that regard. But as far as the volume of water, we don't know. We know there's going to be a lot of rain, as we know that the hurricane has already been mentioned, is moving slowly, just crawling across the state. Be dropping rain the whole time, and is doing the same thing in North Carolina. It's about 300 miles wide. That's a lot of water to come through South Carolina. So we know we're going to have some flooding, and that's why we're urging everyone to remember that after the winds die down, we might have a day or so of what seems to be peace, with a lot of debris down, houses damaged, wires down and trees down, but then that is likely when the flooding we'll see the real flooding. So we got to be very careful.
The region. Can we talk a little more about what folks there are seeing right now as far as the flooding situation?
Well, currently none of those major rivers are in a flood condition at this time. We're expecting that to happen, but it will probably be days before that happens, maybe as early as Monday, as those waters out of North Carolina and our local rainfall causes those rivers to move into a flood condition. So currently we have, other than some small areas with some flash flooding possibly, any large-scale flooding has not started. We're still in the almost in the pre-storm or storm situation now, with the wind field going through, and we will continue to have heavy rains, and we will have flooding conditions in 2 to 3 days.
Outside of the river system, flooding reports or anything like that?
We haven't received any.
No questions?
Our focus is obviously on Florence, but there's a few storm systems right behind it. Are you guys paying attention to those?
Yes, ma'am.
How much are you guys? How far out in advance are you guys planning for those?
We plan out as far as we can, but right now we're focusing on this one because it's the winds and the rain are here, but after that comes the flooding. So we've got plenty to concentrate on.
Last question.
Have any injuries reported or people who've been stranded and need to be rescued so far?
The answer is no.
there obviously are thousands of people on the coast who have not evacuated. Are we past the point of evacuation? I mean, should those people now just hunker down and make sure that they have all?
Well, it is dangerous to drive. If there's water in the streets, it's dangerous. If the wind is blowing, it's dangerous. And so the evacuation order stands. All other precautions stand. We're urging everybody to be patient, be cautious, and don't gamble. We do not want to lose a single life in South Carolina this storm. We're working hard. Thank you very much.
Only begin when it is safe to do so and when there's a high degree of certainty that the emergency road clearance does not have to come back and be recommitted. This is not an active yet debris collection system. Once the storm has passed and we're certain it's passed and the roads have been properly cleared, we'll begin to announce what debris removal looks like. And what will happen in the next day or so is the emergency debris removal, and we're working in partnership with private contractors, as I said, who were pre-positioned, and our partners at the City of Wilmington. At this moment, we do intend to put preliminary damage assessment teams in the field beginning sometime tomorrow. Again, that will be informed by what happens from a weather perspective. So that completes my report, and I'd like to ask Sheriff McMahon to make some comments.
So as you've heard, we're all working very hard to try to keep everybody safe. It is absolutely dangerous out there. You cannot see some of the power lines. I have witnessed people driving over the lines. Some of the areas, if the car was, you'd go right into the power lines with your vehicle. So please, it is very dangerous out there. We've already had one of the deputies sustain a head injury out there and we've been taken to the hospital. So let us do our job. Let us try to answer the calls and get the roads passable. And please stay at home. Be careful. Know that we're out there. If you've left, we're going to do everything we can to keep all your property safe and free from looters. And if you've stayed, then just stay put and be safe. And together, as you can see, we're going to get through this. We always do. So just stay safe and God bless you.
We'll take questions at this point. If you'll let me know who the question is directed to, I'll call them to the podium. The Wilmington Fire Department respond.
I don't really have the specifics about the family. I'm just assuming that that was their home and they chose to stay. It was a large tree that fell on the house, and unfortunately it had trapped the folks pretty severely. They were not extricated from the home alive. I do not know exactly what condition they were in when they were found. But they were not successfully extricated from the house. The last victim was removed about an hour ago, roughly. We were on the scene probably 7:15, somewhere in there, right along with the Hannah Regional Medical Center, EMS. Our guys from the Tempe Park Fire Station, which is not very far from the Mercer Avenue home. In fact, it's probably less than a mile. The rescue company runs out of there as well. So we even had a battalion chief that's a former rescue team member that just jumped right in. Those guys immediately went to work. Requested some additional help. Fire chief was on scene. Some heavy hitters come in from the task force to help us recover those bodies. I'm sorry, repeat your question. In terms of complexity, right? I do not know who actually made the 911 phone call. The complexity of the rescue was technical in the and the sheer size of the tree itself. And so it's not something, the size of the tree is not something you could simply cut with a chainsaw and remove and quickly extricate. I mean, it fell onto the house and brought a portion of the roof down as well. And so you kind of have a situation where the victims are not only pinned under a tree, but they're also pinned over parts of the roof itself. And so it required a tremendous amount of heavy lifting, airbags, and saws to get those folks out. So it was very difficult and required some specialized equipment with regards to heavy lifting capacity.
This is the worst-case scenario, getting out more
You know, not knowing what that individual family situation is, I would not even begin to speculate on what their specific conditions were. Other than when the evacuation orders go out, they should be seriously heeded. Quite honestly, we caught a break with this storm. It's really been a bad storm. I don't mean to undermine it at all. But had this thing come ashore as a Category 4, we could have seen that very type of scenario repeated in neighborhoods all across New Hanover County, the beaches, and the counties surrounding us. So it is, when these storms are approaching our area, it's absolutely critical that people pay attention to them, understand the unpredictability about the damage and the danger that these storms bring. And so I would just encourage everybody to, when you have the opportunity to evacuate in situations like this, please take that advice. I do not know. He was transported to New Hanover Medical Center. I do not know his current condition. We have several calls for trees on houses. At this point, we do not have any calls that I'm aware of, at least in the last 15 or 20 minutes, that involve any entrapments whatsoever. So although there are numerous calls for trees on houses, to my knowledge, there are no individuals trapped in any of the homes right now. Early this morning, we had a structure fire up in the Castle Hayne area. City and county fire units responded to it. I believe the home was a loss, but our crews were responding in certainly strong tropical force winds, but certainly gusts of hurricane force. We made a judgment call on that because at 50 miles an hour sustained, we pull our units off the road. Our Joint Command Center understands that even though we may decide to withhold our response until it's safe to do so, we continue to get 911 calls. We prioritize those calls and we make every effort that we can to get to an emergency. And in that situation, it was a working structure fire, so our command officers made a decision early this morning to make a response. They did the best they could to control the fire, but with the winds and the conditions, it was very difficult. There were no fatalities, no injuries in that, but the house did sustain significant damage. I do not know.
We're going to take 2 more questions.
What's the status? After that at all?
To my knowledge, Duke Energy has not yet begun to actively seek to restore power. They are pre-positioned in the region, and similar to fire response, what we're all trying to wait for is for the winds to die down where it is safe to go out. They go with high-profile vehicles, bucket trucks. Certainly, no one wants to put themselves in a position of elevating themselves still into wind speeds that are 45 miles an hour and gusting much higher than that. But from the public safety perspective, our public safety personnel did make the decision to go out at 45 miles an hour sustained and gusting winds. But we are working in partnership with Duke Power. I'm not in a position to speak with any authority about the situation down there. We are not receiving significant calls from the 911 center, nor have we, has it been indicated to us that there is significant erosion occurring, but that is anecdotal at best. Certainly, I think it was promising that the rain forecasts were lowered. At this point yesterday, we were expecting in some instances more than 30 inches of rain. It is now estimated to be 20 inches or less. Certainly, we're always worried about flooding, and that is, from an evacuation perspective, what we focus on, asking people to move away from rising water. We know the Cape Fear River is expected to crest sometime next week. We use Matthew as an illustration of what happens when lots of rain falls in the inland flooding associated with that, particularly inland from New Hanover County. We have Hurricane Floyd in 1999, again as an illustration of what happens more inland from counties that are on the ocean front from flooding. But I do think it was positive news that it's to be 20 inches or less of rain. I believe that's the final question. Thank you.
1 no había tenido esa intensidad de movimiento de aire desde un huracán en el año 1958. Estamos hablando de hace 60 años que una intensidad 1 no había traído los vientos no sostenidos, sin embargo las ráfagas como las que hemos vivido aquí en el día de hoy. Como digo, ya esto es increíble ver cómo cambia hasta las nubes, el movimiento de las nubes, el viento que venía de mi izquierda a mi derecha, ahora viene de mi derecha hacia mi izquierda y en una forma circular. Les cuento además que en estos momentos hay 500.000 de personas en el área de las Carolinas sin electricidad. Toda la ciudad de Wilmington, una ciudad histórica de más o menos 130.000 personas, se ha quedado sin luz. Y las autoridades de FEMA hablan de que las personas que han tenido que ser rescatadas de sus casas, hablamos más de 500 rescates han tenido que... Sí, mira, ayer estuvimos hablando con una familia salvadoreña, parte de un grupo de salvadoreños que viven aquí en Wilmington, en el área de Wilmington. Llegaron aquí a finales de los años 80, han hecho de Estados Unidos su hogar. Muchos decidieron irse de sus casas para lugares como este hotel donde nos estamos hospedando nosotros, para estar en lugares más seguros, en lugares elevados. Y sin embargo, de estas 18 personas de Morazán y de La Unión que habían salido de sus casas, dejaron a familiares en sus casas, en el vecindario donde viven, porque simplemente dijeron que ellos no se querían ir. Esas zonas, nos contaban ayer, caen inundadas cuando cae una leve lluvia. Con esto yo temo que esas personas pueden haberse quedado atrapadas dentro de sus casas. Y esta agua, felicidades Julio, esto no baja pronto, esto se queda aquí un rato. Y también las lluvias van a continuar, porque cuando veías, Julio, que tú decías al principio de esta transmisión, que este movimiento es muy lento, 6 millas por hora.
Sí, José, eso lo hace particularmente peligroso. Y ahora es una pena que muchas personas en Wilmington, como nos dices, han perdido la electricidad y no puedan ver si hay nuevas advertencias y los llamados de las autoridades. Eso también hace que esto sea aún más peligroso. Pero hablabas de las tejas que han caído en el hotel de enfrente, José, de donde tú estás. ¿Ha habido algunos otros objetos que has visto volar por ahí? Te lo pregunto porque lo que realmente hace peligroso a un huracán también son los objetos que vuelan, se convierten en auténticos proyectiles por el fuerte viento.
Julio, qué buena pregunta. Y te voy a decir que a nosotros, al equipo de Noticias Telemundo, nos ha ocurrido algo. 3 minutos antes de salir al aire aquí en esta transmisión especial, a nuestro productor Fernando Ramírez, que está justo al lado mío, le ha caído él me dice que a centímetros le cayó un pedazo del tejado y le cayó, bueno, dice él que a centímetros. Fernando, no sé si puedes recoger lo que le cayó a Fernando. Le digo que estas son las cosas que Julio y Felicidad, cuando ustedes hablan de que el peligro continúa, es porque esto ocurrió al equipo de Noticias Telemundo 2 minutos antes de salir al aire. Ven, Fernando. Miren, esto, Fernando Ramírez, aguanta aquí, miren. Esto es lo que... Ven, Fernando, ¿dónde estabas tú?
Estábamos ahí atrás de la cámara, el techo cayó a centímetros, imagínate.
A ver, ¿a qué distancia?
A esta distancia.
Este es un hotel de 10 pisos de alto y cayó desde allá, ahí, y por la gracia de Dios, Fernando Ramírez está vivo hoy. Pero eso, amigos, lo que está pasando y los peligros continúan, Julio y Felicidad.
Hay que tener mucho cuidado.
Sí, por eso queremos que ustedes, nuestros compañeros, se mantengan a salvo. Pero bueno, ahí llevan en un gran historial ese equipo que acaban ustedes de ver, recorriendo el país y otros lugares cuando sucede este tipo de fenómenos. Pero más adelante vamos a regresar con José Díaz Balarte. Estamos en este momento de costa a costa transmitiendo para ustedes sobre el huracán Florence.
Vámonos a Wrightsville. Le decíamos que ahí es el punto en donde tocó tierra el huracán preciso. Javier